It's Danny Flexen here for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined by my good friend and co-founder of SJAM Boxing, Mr. Adam Morallee. Adam, how are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Danny. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Got a busy first quarter of the year.
I'm glad to hear it. And I hope that includes the boxing area of your life because you've
Yeah.
got plenty of fighters on the books. Let's, excuse me, start by talking about probably the most celebrated and well-known member of the roster, and that's Joe Joyce, of course. 2023, not his best year, I think it's
Yeah.
fair to say. Suffered the first two defeats of his career in succession against the same man, Zhang, of course. And I guess, what's the feeling in the camp with Joe when you've spoken to him about what the future now holds?
Yeah, look, I think when Joe lost, when you lose twice in quick succession, it can be very damaging for a person. But I think Joe's got a very strong core, very strong belief in himself. And what happened in Saudi on December 23rd with Joseph Parker and Daniel Dubois winning, Joe's stock definitely rose over that. And I think people have a view of Joe, which is, well, I know what my view is. My view is Joe is an elite world level heavyweight that had two bad nights at the office, and it was a bad style for him. And for that, I take my share of the blame. But I think he's a world elite level heavyweight and will continue to be so, and he'll show that. And that's why he beat Joseph Parker, and that's why he beat Daniel Dubois. And he'll come back this year with some big fights. Others have said, it's shown that Joe's not at the level, and that's why he's been knocked out. But I disagree with them. But the truth will become apparent this year.
And you said your share of the blame there. It spares me the awkward necessity of bringing it up. There has been criticism of SJAM and Joe's team for picking Zhang the first time around. Not for the rematch, because then he had to fight him again to get back into position, but for picking him the first time when perhaps a different opponent may have been better. What's your view on that?
Yeah, look, I mean, in 2022, I think we went like 26 unbeaten or whatever. And I think matchmaking's difficult because you want your boxers to be in really competitive fights, but you don't want to lose. And I think what I wouldn't want to come out of this is for people to encourage people to take less challenging fights because the manager or the team's worried about how they look if the person loses. There was a big team of us that decided on that fight, right from the promoter to the trainer to me. We all looked at it. And, our logic at the time was sound. Our logic at the time was sound. Zhang was coming off a defeat to Ergovic, although arguably won. His engine was not great after 5 rounds. We saw that in the first fight. Zhang really began to decrease, and we thought Joe would take over. So the logic was sound. It just didn't work out in the end. But, you can't beat yourself up every time you lose and congratulate yourself every time you win. It's one of those things. In hindsight, doesn't look like great matching, but what we've got to make sure of is that as Joe progresses in his career, we learn our lessons from that and we move on. If Joe goes out and, this year beats Daniel Dubois and beats Joseph Parker, he's going to be right at the top of the division again. And no one will worry about that. And that's the great thing about the heavyweight division. It's like show business. The heavyweight division is like show business. They want big characters. Joe's a big character. He is now, TNT and the Warrens put a ton of money into Joe, and albeit the worst year of his career, no doubt, he was watched by a lot of people and is now a real named heavyweight, and he will get a lot of work.
We'll go back to Joe in a few minutes, but I just want to ask you, there's been strong rumours that at the launch press conference for Joshua and Ngannou later today, it's possible it could be announced that Zhang and Parker may face each other on that card. By the time people watch this, we'll know if that's come to fruition or not. But if that were to take place, who would you fancy in that? How would you see it going?
Oh, it's a great fight. I've heard that today as well. Strong rumor. I think you saw from Parker Wilder that Parker and his trainer Andy Lee can devise a very specific game plan, as they did for Wilder, to avoid the right hand. And they'll have another specific game plan for Zhang. They'll be thinking the same we did, which was drag Zhang into deep waters. Later on, Parker will take over. Initially, I think many people will think Zhang, big puncher, probably too much for Parker. I think it'll be a terrific fight. Zhang and his team are tremendous people, as is Joseph Parker. It's effectively the battle of the good guys, that is. And very, very tight fight. I see the argument for both of them. I actually think I quite like Joseph Parker in it. I quite like Joseph Parker in it.
And then that could lead to a rematch with Joe, as you say. I mean, he's got the victory over him in what was a very entertaining fight, grueling for both men, of course, but great for those of us who weren't in the fray. How likely is that rematch, or is the Dubois rematch more likely for Joe?
I mean, look, Joe's got to have his comeback first. He's got to have a fight. He's got to win that. But yeah, those rematches are all on the table. So are all the other fights at the top of the division. Joe Joyce has got to re-establish himself and show who he is, the person we all know him to be. He has not overnight become a bad fighter.
How exciting is it to have a heavyweight in the highest level of the sport at a time when Turki Al Sheikh and his team have come in a big way with Riyadh season, and that seems to be hugely beneficial for the fighters, certainly.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, you know, Queensbury are leading on that. We've got a very close relationship with them. We've spoken about Joe going to Saudi. Obviously, got Solomon Dakers with them now as well. We've spoken about our heavyweights going to Saudi, and they'll go there at the right time. Right now, Joe should make his comeback in England. He's got a camp in England. He should make his comeback in the first quarter of this year. And then we should be thinking about big fights. But, you know, I think there's a lot of money in Saudi. There's a lot of money in Saudi, and that's obviously very attractive to people. But for as many big fights happen in Saudi, Joshua Ngannou, Fury Usyk, maybe even Fury Joshua, if that came to fruition, it means there's a big gap in the UK for big heavyweight fights to take place. And, you know, I, for one, would like Joe Joyce to step into that gap and have big fights in the UK and be the guy that fights in the UK. Why couldn't we have Joe Joyce, Daniel Dubois in the UK? I think that would do 20, 25,000. And there's not that many big fights that are going to happen in the UK. That's the danger. I mean, I'm all for what's going on in Saudi. I think it's brilliant for the sport. But are you going to remove a lot of big fights in the UK? Probably, and especially big heavyweight fights. Think of the British heavyweights. I mean, you've got kind of the Fabio Wardley British title level, and those guys all fighting for that. I mean, even that fight took place in Saudi, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah, British title fight out there. I mean, are you getting any suggestion from the Dubois team that he's interested in that rematch?
To be honest with you, I've not even gone there yet. I've not even gone there. I think we've got to look what's ahead of us. We'd be getting ahead of ourselves if we did that. But I do think Daniel would be interested in that fight. That's outside of the mega names, outside of the AJs and the Furies. Joe Joyce and Daniel Dubois are the next best two. I don't think there'll be much dispute of that. Dillian White's off on his drug ban. Derek Chisora is effectively semi-retired. That's whichever way round you want to say it. That's number 3 and 4 British heavyweights. They should fight each other. They should fight each other in a big all-British clash in the summer, I think. That's what should happen. But no, I haven't reached out to Dan Dubois' management. I know he's got a good team around him. He's got Don around him now, Martin Bowers, you know, good people. In the first fight, it was very civil between us. And yeah, I think that's a great potential fight. But, you know, let's see if it happens.
And there was some questioning at the time of Joe's second defeat to Zhang if he should carry on at all. That's clearly something you've decided that he will go back into the ring and at a good level. But did you ever consider talking to him about retirement?
I don't know where that came from. I mean, it's easy to say there was talk of it, but if one person says it, does that mean there's talk of it? I mean, you know, Joe never said it, but I think
no. I mean more speculation, people suggesting it, not necessarily people involved.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I think people suggested it probably of AJ when he lost to Usyk for the second time, to be fair.
Yeah.
I think people will suggest it. I think you're always looking at that as a boxing manager. You want to look after your boxer, and he is 38 years old. It was never on my mind. I was never contemplated by me or by Joe. But yeah, if some people want to talk about that, they can talk about it.
What would you say to kind of, I mean, you don't have to convince anyone, you're under no obligation, but how would you convince people that Joe doesn't need to retire yet?
That's an interesting question. I don't think anyone needs to convince people he doesn't need to retire. It's ultimately it's a question for him. I think a different question could possibly be, why is Joe Joyce still relevant? Why is he interesting to watch? Like, you know, people might have short memories, but coming off his win in Parker in September 23rd, 2022, he was seen as the wrecking ball of the division that no one wanted to face. Not a single person would face Joe. That was part of our issue with matchmaking him. Not a single person would face him. I mean, if Zhang loses to Parker, I don't know who was going to fight Zhang, because he's then going to have no WBO interim, and he's a machine. He's a monster machine. So he will be Mr. No one wants to fight him. So Zhang's career, I'm not saying he's older than Joe, but not that he should retire from it, but he will find it almost impossible to get fights if he loses to Parker, because he's so dangerous and he won't have any goods. Joe Joyce doesn't have the WBO interim anymore, but still has the goods in terms of recognition factor and TNT and the Warrens backing him. There are so many good fights for Joe out there, so many interesting fights. And when you have a guy with that style come forward, takes a lot of punches, but he's never ever in a boring fight. And, you know, as his management, you've got to look after him. You don't want him to take too much punishment. But Joe looks after himself. He's very healthy. Look at Beterbiev at 39. You know, if you look after yourself and you don't abuse your body and you do the right things as Joe does, he's in incredible condition. He can go on. And Beterbiev's 39 in the light heavyweight division. Then won the heavyweight division where boxers have gone well into their 40s. So if he's healthy and he's fit, there are so many great fights for Joe Joyce.
Now, another one of your fighters that's achieved things already at world level is Lerone Richards. Had a kind of rebuilding year last year. I think it's fair to say got 2 good outings, good wins. How challenging has it been with Lerone? Because he came off that career best win against Gongora, didn't fight the following year, and then he's kind of come back. He's changed trainers, of course, as well.
Yeah.
How challenging is that process?
Yeah, really challenging for Lerone. I mean, look, he is one person alongside Joe Joyce in our stable who really has competed at world level. He is elite at 168. The 168 division in the UK isn't as exciting as it used to be with kind of British names. But, you know, there are people coming back, and I think Lerone wants to win a world title. Well, he's won the IBO world title at 168, but he really wants to get one of the other world titles at 168. And so he last fought 175. He's got Wasserman, he's got Nissa Sauerland behind him at Wasserman. He's got Channel 5 behind him. He's got another effectively kind of lower level fight in the first quarter of this year. And then from then he's going to push on. He's going to really, really push on. But it was tremendously difficult for Lerone. The guy's got unbelievable heart to get through what he got through. Like, you know, he was on big purses and then kind of nothing for him, kind of nothing. And then coming back after a long time out at a lower level, but showed his class.
Why do you think it is that it's been an issue with getting those fights? Is it simply that, you know, high risk, low reward? Is it that simple?
Yeah, I think sometimes for certain boxers, you know, Lerone's name was put in the frame for lots and lots of fights, and people watch him. He's southpaw, he's tricky, he's difficult. He's very, very difficult to beat, Lerone Richards. Like, incredibly difficult to beat. And by the same token, he's one for the purists. He's not knocking people out. And so that's difficult for someone like Lerone. What you have to do with someone like Lerone is get him into a mandatory position, get him a world title, and then his career will really kick on. So that's what we've got to do with him.
And you said about the British fighters in the division. There are still a few dotted about on the fringes of world level, or even at world level. You've got John Ryder, of course. Zach Parker's come back since their fight. Is that something you could explore?
Great fights. We'd love those. We'd love the Ryder fight. We'd love the Zach Parker fight. Anyone around world level, Lerone would love that. There's a kind of level below that that's kind of fighting it out for the British at 168 with Jack Cullen, Zach Chelly, those kind of guys. But I think Lerone's kind of been there, done that. He wants to push on now. But yeah, even if Billy Joe comes back, you know, we'd love Lerone. I'd love Lerone to have all British fights, but really his eyes on world level fights for Lerone.
Kind of a credit to you guys as managers as well, that you don't just look for fighters who've got, you know, the really flashy knockout style or massive fan base. Lerone, for a lot of people, will be a hard sell, and you haven't shied away from that, and you're still trying to guide him to a world title.
Not at all. Like Lerone, probably, I don't know, Danny, you're more of a kind of boxing historian than me, but it's been with every major promoter. I don't know how many boxers done that. It's been with the Warrens, been with the Hearns, been with Boxer, been with Wasserman. You know, we've moved him to these different places to push his career on. I really hope we're in the right place now. All those promoters, as part of the journey, are part of it, and they've all tried hard with Lerone, but I think we've got the right place now.
Yeah, I mean, he's an incredible talent. It's just kind of purveying that to the general public.
Exactly.
Well, fingers crossed. What about some of the younger talent? Who do you feel will make the big strides this year? I mean, we saw the year close with Johnny Fisher winning the Southern Area title, but then there's kind of the more unsung guys like you, John Hedges, and people like that.
Yeah,
Darius
so we've got
Norton.
Johnny out in Vegas February the 3rd. Very excited for that. He'll take a lot of fans out there, and it'd be good for him. Another step up. We'll have a half decent opponent from there, and another step up in his progress. And then I'd like to see Johnny progress through to the English level, the English heavyweight level this year. We currently have Solomon Dakers, obviously English champ there. I'd like to see Solomon progress up to British level and really get that Fabio Wardley, Fraser Clark fight. If Fabio Fraser fight, get the winner of that. Looking to make a really good competitive fight for Seoul in March. But then February the 10th, we have on the same night John Hedges and Tommy Fletcher fighting. One at the Copper Box and one at the Indigo. And hopefully Mark Tibbs will be like, on a special bike zipping in between the two places. And hopefully I might be able to make both fights. But both of them, I think, are going to have big step up years. I think it's the time for them to definitely move up to area level. They're both at the same weight, actually, and both probably chasing the same things. I hope they never fight each other. I really, really hope they don't. But they're both tremendous talents in different ways. Tommy with probably a flashier, more knockout style. John with more of the boxer heritage. And yeah, I think either of those two could make big strides this year. I think when you talk about big strides, Junaid at his age, he fought in Arizona in December on Sonny Edwards Bam Rodriguez card, and he really stepped up in a really tough fight and showed real heart and balls. I think that showed us what he's got to work on, but I can see him pushing on to kind of English level for sure this year, maybe pushing British level. I think at 154, there's room for a guy like Junaid at 154. So I'd say, yeah, you're right. Tommy and John Hedges don't get a lot of that, but they're two tremendously young, talented boxers, both really young, both under 21. So I'm very excited to see. It's a big year for them. It's a big year for the whole stable, but it's a really, really big year for those two. I think Junaid has already shown his levels. He's already beaten, I think, a Central Area title, a Scottish champion, not for those titles, but he's already shown he's at area level moving on. I think it's time for those two boys to show who are at that level. And then we got February 16th in New York with Guido Vianello. Now, Guido's someone who you can't really call a prospect anymore. He's been with Top Rank for 5 years.
Sure.
Heavily disrupted career through COVID. But Guido is in line for a big fight. He's fighting guy on February 16th, Moses Johnson, which isn't a big fight. But Top Rank have got a lot of big heavyweights. From everyone from F.A. Jagba to Frank Sanchez. Well, Frank Sanchez isn't with them, but he was offered the Sanchez fight. Guido was before. So there are big fights out there for Guido, and I really want to see him step up. I mean, Jared Anderson is with Top Rank. Yeah. That's a really interesting fight for Guido. Charles Martin's with Top Rank. I mean, I want to see. He's Guido's Ngannou's chief sparring partner, and has been with him in Paris, and is going with him to Riyadh. And Ngannou's got him because Guido is of a level where Ngannou, was really struggling with Guido in the gym. And so Ngannou sees Guido at that very high level as someone to aspire to in terms of boxing capability. And I've been getting some interesting updates from Guido on Ngannou.
Well, on that, what has Guido told you about Ngannou? And as a result of that intimate knowledge, were you surprised by his performance against Tyson Fury?
Yeah, I was surprised. Tyson Fury's elite world level, isn't he? And Ngannou is effectively a novice boxer. So I was surprised. But one thing I wasn't surprised about, and one thing Guido says, excuse my language, he punches fucking hard. And Guido sparred everyone. Tyson Fury, Joe Joyce, incredible one-punch boxer. So I think, yeah, when you know that, and then you see the knockdown of Tyson Fury, you can understand that. But I actually think Ngannou Joshua, brilliant fight. It's gonna be a great fight. Ngannou's got the power to trouble Joshua. Joshua against an 0-1 guy. No one would ever predict it would get so much attention. I know Eddie Hearn said he thought Johnny Fisher would beat Ngannou, and I do actually think Johnny Fisher would beat Ngannou. That's not hyperbole for me. I do think Johnny Fisher would beat Ngannou, but I still think Ngannou Joshua is a tremendous fight.
Is that because as much as you're impressed with Ngannou from what Guido's told you, we know of Joshua's flaws, frailties as well?
Yeah, I just think it's an exciting. I think whenever you have someone like Ngannou who's got one punch power, a bit like Wilder, then the fight's exciting. I mean, really, Anthony Joshua's a different class to Ngannou. Really different class. He's shown that last year. He's been well managed, come back with 3 good fights. Now he's got this again, excellent management. But I think there's a perception of Joshua, whether true or not, that he may have frailties, and that will be played upon and preyed upon in the promotion of that fight.
And just finally, before I let you go, what can we expect from SJAM in 2024? Apart from the names we've already discussed, are you planning to increase the size of the stable, for example?
Yeah, so we've got Florian Marcoux out in the first quarter, and I think he's going to make a big noise this year. I think you're going to see Florian get the respect of the British public and not really just as a ticket seller. That's one thing I predict. I think for a lot of our younger guy and people like Solomon Dakers as well, I think they're going to move into the levels of, yeah, okay, we've got to take notes of these guys at effectively European fringe world level. And I've got Nicola Bark, who should be making a debut this year, who's a female fighter we're really, really excited about. I don't think there's another woman fighter out there like her with that profile and how she is. I'm very excited about her in 2024. But I think for SJAM, 2024 will be really a year where our very young stable really starts to step up and sees whether it can compete. I mean, the thing about boxing is once you find your level, you find your level. It's like when people box Baturbiev and Bivol and they think they're great fighters, and then there's nothing more depressing than that. I remember once seeing Lemroy Thomas after he fought Joe Joyce, and he was crushed just because he found his level. And finding your level in boxing is a really depressing thing for boxers. But I really hope our guys get through this year, and I fully expect them to, not having found their level.
I don't think you should be allowed to mention Nicola Bark without mentioning her nickname, the Burmese Python, which has got to be one of the best nicknames in boxing.
Burmese Python, who, sparred Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
Kickboxing. Yeah, they're both from Luton.
Yeah, Andrew Tate busted her nose, didn't he, or something?
Yeah, Andrew Tate busted her nose. She did kickboxing sparring where you go in and then you've got to fight like 4 of them at once, and one of them was Andrew Tate, and he busted her nose. But yeah, so she can handle herself.
Well, we know how in favour of equality Andrew Tate is. So.
It is, isn't it?
There you go. All right, really appreciate your time. I'm glad we got to do this. Let's do it again. Maybe not leave it so long next time. Although Christmas did get in the way, to be fair.
100%, Danny. Great talk to you, mate.